Hi, welcome to this tutorial with me, Tim Clapham from HelloLux.com, and this tutorial is going to be all about one of the most important managers that you will find within your Cinema4D interface, and it's one that you use every day or every time you work with Cinema4D, and that manager is the Attribute Manager. Now the Attribute Manager is so full of features that I thought it would be really important to go through for some of those, and hopefully for all of you watching out there's going to be one or two new tips that you glean from this tutorial. So it's not going to be full of amazing, animation at the end of it, but hopefully it will really improve your workflow. Now I did include a tutorial some time ago about using the various modes within the Attribute Manager, and I'll just go over that quickly again because there are a few new modes, so we may as well start there. Okay, so you can see I've got the Attribute Manager open here, and by default it's got the project settings. If we come to the mode menu, you can see down here it's on project. Now we've got all these other modes, and these are the kind of modes that this Attribute Manager will allow, and we can go to them and we can choose them. So we can choose project info. This will tell us the objects within our scene, any selections that we have, the structure of something selected, and any textures within our scene, and we can use this to find any missing textures, and we can select those textures and we can switch them out in nice easy step. The other thing we can do here is we can come to camera, for instance, and we're using the editor camera at this point. You can see there's no camera object in the scene, but this allows us to adjust the parameters of the editor camera. So if we want to adjust the focal length, for instance, any of these settings, we can do that for our editor camera. Now one of the really useful things about the modes is you can enable and disable different modes and have more than one Attribute Manager. And like a really common use for that is to have one for your every kind of object, and another one maybe set up for tools. It's really easy to do. If we just click to create a new Attribute Manager, okay, and at the moment you can see it's locked, and the lock is another feature, allows you to lock the Attribute Manager so that as we select different things it doesn't change. So I've got two Attribute Managers. If I add a cube, you can see they both update, and we've got a cube settings in both of those. If I now come over to my move tool, they both update, and we now have our move tool in both. But what we can do is we can come into our first Attribute Manager here, and we can say configure modes, and we can uncheck tool. Okay, so now that doesn't show any tools, and we can switch through our different tools and they don't show up in this Attribute Manager. If we add a cube, it then shows up. But we've still got cubes showing in here. So say we want to limit this to tools only, we basically do the opposite. We come to configure modes and we uncheck everything in here except for tool. And what that means is that this Attribute Manager will only show us settings for the various tools, and this one will show us everything else. So if we add another cube, you can see this one only stays with move, but if we change to a different tool like rotate or scale, you can see that this one updates. That's really handy, so you can have two attributes in your layout. You can have one of them for tools all the time and one of them for object parameters all the time. I actually have a very similar setup in my kind of everyday layout, and what I would probably do is grab my object manager and push that somewhere like here, and then probably let's just undock and get rid of these for now, and then I would have my two Attribute Managers like so. So I've got my tools and my object parameters. Okay, so in this scene here we've got all these different cubes. Let's just delete some of these and select the first cube, and you can see that as we select them we have our different settings for that object, and we have these different tabs along the top. You can actually click and drag across these tabs, or you can click and you can use your right mouse button to select or deselect different sets of tabs. So that's pretty handy. If we come to our coordinates, you can see that we can click to select the different parameters, and if we click on the P for position, for instance, it will highlight all of them, and we can click on S. So if we wanted to move this object to say 200, 200, 200, We can click on the P to select all of those. If we type in 200 in here and hit return, it only affects one of them. But if, however, we type 200 in here and we hold down Control and hit return, it will affect all of them. In fact, you can hold down Control and you can scrub these values, and any that are selected will adjust. And the great thing about this as well is if we set this to say 50 and this one to 0, and now if we hold down Shift and Control and we drag, they will stay relative. Okay, boom, let's just put 0 in there and reset. He says let's put 0 and reset those to 0. Now, of course, we can work with multiple selections of objects within our attribute manager as well. So let's just add in a few more cubes. So we've got 11 cubes here. And if we select all of those, you can see at the top it says 11 elements. And it will try and allow you to adjust any parameters for those objects. If they're all the same type. If they're not, then it will limit the number of parameters that you can access. And if you've got loads and loads of objects, then you can come into your preferences, and if you look under interface, here we have attribute manager selection limit, and the limit is 1000, which is actually pretty low. If you've been working with a cloner object and you've been cloning on a surface or a grid array, then it's not going to take much to get more than 1000 objects. And say you make that editable for some reason, and then you need to select them all and change certain parameters. Sometimes you might think, oh, it's not changing all of them. And the reason for that is probably because your attribute manager limit is set to 1000. So just increase that to like 10,000 or something. The reason it's set like that is because when you have like hundreds of thousands of objects selected, it's going to slow down a little bit. So I think Maxon set that limit there to stop that kind of slowdown. But it's a little bit of a gotcha. Let's come back to our attribute manager and let's have a look. So we've got 10 cubes selected. Now, of course, if we adjust these values, it's going to adjust them for all of them. But you can use formulas in here. So for instance, we could just put RND 500, and that's like random 500. And if we hit return, you can see that it's moved it to a random 500. But it's done the same for all of them. So that's not really that much use, is it? So what about if we put X plus RND 500. You can see now that it's given them all a unique random amount. Hasn't really spread them out that much actually. So let's just do that again. X plus RND, and let's say 2000, and hit return. Okay, and there we go, and you can see they're kind of spreading out now. And if we go through each one, you can see they now have like a random number that I've set them to. And if we just select those, and let's do the same along Z, and let's put X plus RND 1000. So now they're all spread out along here. So basically what X does is it takes the original value and then adds or multiplies or whatever formula you want to use on top of that original value. So here we have all of our cubes moved along Z slightly, but if we just put X plus 500, what's going to happen is they're all going to maintain the same relative position, but they'll move 500 units. And if I hit return, you can see that is exactly what happens. And that's really handy if you have like a whole bundle of lights. Let's just add in a few lights. Let's just move them around so we can see them all. And let's switch here and adjust the the intensity of them. So they're all different intensities. Some of them are very bright and some of them aren't. You can see that here. Of course, you can select all of those, and then in here you can put X times 2 if you want to make them all twice as bright. And there we go, and you can see now that they will all be twice as bright as they were before. So that's a really handy way of working with multiple objects and working with formulas. And if you ever want to know what formulas you can use, you can come and open up the help. Okay, and if we come to the manual and come to reference, so let me remember where it is. It's it's right at the bottom somewhere, appendix formula, and there you go. So you could probably just search for formula up here and you'd find it much quicker. But here we go, and we have a bit of a summary of some of the formulas and things that it will accept. And you can see that I use the random function here, but there's all sorts of different functions that you can use and different operators, and you can use those to control various elements within your scene. So you can essentially use these kind of formulas within your parameters to replicate MoGraph even if you don't have it. So you can create random position, random size, that kind of thing, nice and easily and quickly. Closing this down and coming back to our attribute manager. Let's select our light again. You know, you can right click on the little spinner here and that will reset that value to the default value. Another thing that you can do is if you type a number in like 85, if you decide against it, you can just press escape before accepting it and it will go back to the value that you know, that was in there before you changed it. With any parameter that has this circle next to it, you can use that for animation. So you can hold down Control and just click on there and you can see that that then goes red, which shows we've added a keyframe. If we move to another point in time and we change the value, you can see that it goes orange without being filled, and orange means that you've changed the value. If we just move again, and you can see that now it's gone back to being red but without being filled. So that means it's exactly the same value as any keyframes either side of the current point in time, and you haven't changed that value. Let's just adjust that, add a key, and you can see now it goes red again. And if we adjust this, you can see that it goes orange but it's filled. That means we're actually on a keyframe at this point in time, but we've changed the value. Now if you want to remove a keyframe, you can hold down Shift and that will remove the key on the current frame. So that's pretty handy as well. So you can essentially animate by using Control and Shift, and if you press Control and Shift and click on here, that will actually remove the whole animation track. Now you can right click and choose animation and do that in here, add keyframe, delete keyframe, and delete track, but using Shift and Control or Shift or Control is probably a much quicker way of doing that. Another thing that's probably fairly obvious is you can select any parameters. For instance, we could come to coordinates and we could select X and Y by holding down Control. If you hold down Shift, it will select all of them in between. But once you've got those selected, you can right click and choose Copy, and then you can select your other elements and you can right click and choose Paste, or you can choose Paste Identical to paste identical values over a whole group of parameters. While we're looking at the right click menu, you can see there's a few other options in here. You can select all of the parameters, you can deselect all, you can choose to add to the head-up display. You can use this to create expressions, and let's think of a quick example of that. So if I just delete these lights and let's add in something like cylinder, and let's just make this a bit bigger so we can see it, and let's make our light a little bit brighter. There we go. And what we can do is we can say, okay, on my cylinder I want to take the rotation, and you can right click and choose expressions, set driver, and then you can choose another parameter and you can choose set driven. So you choose expressions, set driven, you have absolute or relative, and what will happen is it will create an espresso setup for you, and there we go, and you can see now that the rotation of my cylinder is going through a range mapper and controlling the intensity of my light. So theoretically I can grab my cylinder here, switch to coordinates, and as I adjust the rotation, you can see that the light does indeed get brighter or darker. So there we have one instant dimmer switch. And you can see something else that's happened, which is a relatively new feature. You can see that the icon here has changed, and now we have this small square with a triangle in it, and that means that it's being controlled in Espresso. And if we look at that and then compare it with the light, you can see the light has one as well, but this time the triangle's on the other side. And this this means this is a driven parameter, and if we look at this one, this means it's a driving parameter. In other words, what that means is it means that parameter is in Espresso and it's either got an input or an output. So that's a really quick, handy way of looking at your attribute manager and telling how these parameters are used within your Espresso setup. Talking of Espresso, did you know you can drag virtually anything that's in the attribute manager into Espresso. So if you're not sure how to get something into your Espresso setup, you can pretty well be guaranteed that dragging it in from the attribute manager will work. So here's an example. Let's just create a new material and let's add like a noise shader. If we open up that noise shader, you can see, here we go, we've got our Espresso set up here. Where's my noise shader gone? Oh my goodness, this brings us to another feature of the attribute manager, the back arrow. Let's click our back arrow and we're back to our noise shader. And what we can do is we can grab this little icon here and we can drag that into our Espresso setup. And there you go. Now we've got noise and we have like the shader properties, and we can control all of those, or we can use them to control other elements. And it works with many things, not just with materials. And while we've got a material here, let's just have a look and see what else we can do with our attribute manager. Let's add in luminance, and let's add in some diffusion. You can actually drag this icon here and you can drop it onto these tabs and it will switch to those different channels, and then you can drop that straight onto the various texture slots. If we were in here and let's say we added in like a layer shader and we put that into a fusion inside a colorizer or something like this, and let's go in and open these up. It doesn't really make much sense what I've done, and now we're deep inside here, and then we come back and we select our light. We can use the back arrow here, but did you know you can actually right click on here and it will show you all of the previous elements that you had within your attribute manager, so you can quickly and easily go back to that noise shader, or you can go to that colorizer shader without having to select your material and then click on here and then click again and then click again to get into there. So that's a really handy thing to do. And while we're up the top here, you can see there's also a forwards button, so if we've gone back then you can use that to go forward. So they're just like browser buttons. We also have an up button, and that takes you up one hierarchical level. So with the material, it's going to take us up to the level above. So if we go into here and into here and into here, then we can use this to go back up. If we select something like a tag, it should take us up to the object. And if we have an object with a hierarchy of objects, it will take you up to the hierarchy above. So if we go up from here, we should go to our project settings. Let's select this light again, and let's just kind of drag across and open up a few tabs. The next thing we have is a filter here, and we can use this to filter any parameters. So I'm just shadow, and you can see that it shows me what tab it's from, and it brings up any parameters that may contain that keyword. So that's pretty handy. Let's just switch off from there at the moment, and we can hide this. We also have a lock feature, and this is really handy if you need to keep something there while you select other objects or other things that may change what's in the attribute manager. And I suppose one example of this might be if we add a tracer object here, and we have the object trace link field, and what I want to do is I want to add a group of objects, or they're already in my object manager and I want to drag them in here, but I haven't got them selected yet. So you can lock this, and let's just add in some cubes, and we can select these cubes and we can drag them into that trace link, which is pretty handy. And you can see that the object in question is here in the attribute manager, but it's not actually selected within our object manager. And you know that if you have something displayed in the attribute manager, you can double click on the icon and it will select that object, so that's pretty handy as well. I'm just going to unlock that. The next icon here is for locking the mode. So if you want to lock the mode, and when I say mode, I'm talking about this. If you only want to show tags, for instance, you select your tag and then you lock the mode, and it will only show tag information in this. So it's a quick way of kind of adjusting the configure modes, and you can quickly unlock it. And the last icon here, of course, is to open up a new attribute manager. Now, as soon as we've got a trace link or an include list here, you can actually right click and you can remove objects in here. You can select the object in the object manager from within that list. If we add in something like a target tag, this has got a link field in here, so let's just target that light, and you can use this little pop-up here to select that element or to show it in manager. If you select that element, then you can of course come to scroll first active, and if you've got a huge hierarchy, it will scroll to that object straight away. If we come back to this tag, another thing that we have is we have folding down, like any object that's linked, you can actually fold this down and you can access that object's parameters from that tag. So we've actually got the tag selected, but we're looking at the parameters of the light, and we can fold that up. So that's a pretty handy way. If you want to edit the parameters of a linked object, you can do that way. And you know, if that was a linked object with another linked object in it, you can kind of keep going. So if we had something linked into that light, then that would work too. Another option we have with links, link fields like this, is we have this little arrow, and we can click on that, and it gives us a question mark, and we can choose a new object to place into that field. So we can click that cube, for instance. You should see that cube is then placed in there. Okay, so kind of running out of things to think of off the top of my head. Let's just add in an extrude. Wanted to show you how you can access subchannels, and this is useful on certain objects like an extrude. So here we've got movement, and you can see we have 3 different parameters. If we right click and choose show subchannels, and I think that's under user interface in release 14, and now we have movement X, Y and Z, and if we click on the individual X, Y or Z, then we can keyframe those independently rather than having 3 tracks for that. And this is also possible if we just come to our material, and let's add in like a gradient. And if we open this up, and if we add a few knots in here, we can choose interface show subchannels, and we can just keyframe the color of one of those knots or the position of one of those knots, rather than having to keyframe the gradient itself, which will result in a huge number of tracks if we've got lots of knots on there. And another popular shader is the layer shader, and of course you can keyframe the layers up here, but if you right click and choose show subchannels, and let's just add a few more in here, and you can see that now down here we can actually keyframe the opacity of these. It'd be nice if the keyframe icon was here, but it's not. It's down here, but it still allows us to key individual channels within our layer shader, and to access that you just use show subchannels. So I think that brings us to the end of this tutorial. There's quite a lot of stuff that I haven't gone into. I haven't gone into working with spline graphs. I haven't really gone into working with gradients and the options there. We haven't looked at any user data. We haven't looked at working with presets. We haven't looked at working with parameters in the head-up display. But I think that we've covered a fair amount of stuff in the attribute manager, and I hope you found that useful. Don't forget to head on over to hellolux.com, and there are plenty more tutorials, and I'll be adding a lot more over the coming months. So thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.